You're listening to The Sensible Sessions. I'm your host, Amber Wardell. Along with my guests who range from experts in their fields to people with incredible experiences and perspectives, our hope is to bring you stories designed to make you laugh, make you cry, or make you think, bringing a sensible approach to a world that's lost its mind. So stay tuned and let's start the show. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Sensible Sessions. I'm your host, Amber Wardell. It's just me today. I don't have a guest, and that's on purpose. I just have some things that I have one thing I wanted to talk about, and it's something that has been on my mind for a while. I feel like for a lot of us, 2025 has been a year of emotional reckoning. This has been on my heart and on my mind so much that I just wrote an article for Psychology Today about it, which, by the way, I'm super proud of because there was some woo-woo shit in that article that I was pretty sure was going to make them reject it. I was like, there's no way they're going to publish this one. But thankfully, I was able to pepper in enough of the cognitive psychology stuff that they were like, okay, we'll let it slide. So today I'm going to talk about these emotionally turbulent times that we're in, and I'm going to try to bridge the gap between some of the things you might be hearing coming from like the spiritual, astrological, like woo-woo girlies on TikTok and Instagram with what people in the psychology and therapeutic realm are talking about, because a lot of these things actually have so much synergy. If you're new here, my name is Amber Wardell. I am a cognitive psychologist. I have a PhD in cognitive psychology. I am not a therapist. It is important to note that, but my research and understanding is all about the human mind and motivation, and particularly emotions and emotion regulation, and how the emotions impact how we think, how we regulate our behavior, how we motivate ourselves in our daily lives and in our relationships. And so although I don't meet with clients and do therapy and things like that, I do have a pretty large wealth of knowledge about just the brain and the mind and the body and how they all work together. And I happen to dibble dabble in the woo-woo world as well. So I'm going to try to bring all of that together with some personal stories today as well, and just talk about what the hell we're going through in 2025. Today's episode is brought to you by Beyond Self-Care Potato Chips, choosing nourishing self-care in a quick fix culture. If you've ever felt like bubble baths and candles aren't cutting it, this book is for you. Written by a cognitive psychologist, it's full of relatable stories, insights to help you step into your power, set boundaries, and feel truly nourished mind, body, and soul. Links to the paperback, Kindle, and audiobook versions are in the show notes below. Astrologically speaking, we've basically had our asses handed to us since then. It's been like just a hodgepodge of planets in retrograde and then eclipses and all kinds of stuff. And if you're not super familiar with the woo-woo world, my hair's even feeling it. Look at that. Just know this. When things go retrograde, things here on the earthly realm get really confusing. Communication breaks down. Our emotions go haywire. And just from a like mind and body perspective, if you're like, oh my God, the moon and the planets, posh, pish posh, just know the moon, in the same way that the moon can regulate the tides of the ocean, our bodies are made up mostly of water. The moon probably has a much bigger impact on our feelings and our bodies than we wish to acknowledge. So it's not entirely pish posh when you hear people talking about what the moon is doing and the impact that it might be having on us as individuals and as the collective. So there's that. For me in particular, this time of year has been a time of revisiting old wounds. And I have a few hypotheses about why that has been. One of them is just astrologically speaking, this has been a time of closure. It has been a time of re-examining our relationships collectively and going, what did I need to learn from that? And in particular, for those of us who have been like people pleasing a lot throughout our lifetimes, it's been a time of looking and going, well, wait a minute, do I have to sacrifice as much of myself as I have been sacrificing in order to feel safe and connected in my relationships? Or is it possible that I would actually feel safer and more connected in my relationships if I was not sacrificing myself as much? And that's been a big one for me personally to have to be looking at, and for a lot of people I know. I happen to run with a lot of people pleasers. We've all been doing that work lately. But another thing that I've just been going through personally is that for those of you who have been around me for a while, who followed me on my other platforms, you may remember that it was around this time last year that I was going through a really public friend breakup. Not of my own choosing. I would not have preferred for that friendship to end, nor for it to go down as publicly as it did. but it went that way. To give like a little recap, and I'm not going to name any names. If you know who I'm talking about, leave it out of the comments, okay? But I had a friend who had been a very dear friend of mine who I met through social media. And around the same time that her cat got sick, my dad found out that his cancer was back for the third time. And with this friend, we had a kind of a pattern of me always being her emotional support system. She was an emotionally turbulent person, but she was also a very beautiful person and someone who I deeply loved. And so I was willing to do that. But when her cat got sick and my dad, his cancer came back for the third time, I could not at the time be available for her the way that she was used to. And rather than that being a conversation about like, okay, how do we navigate this difficult time for us both? She ended our friendship in a really nasty way. And it was just a really dark time. I gained weight. I got really emotionally unstable. I wasn't sleeping. I started drinking way too much. It was a really hard time of my life. And thankfully I was able to heal from it. I was able to learn some lessons from it. And I hope she did too. And I hope she's doing well. I'm going to leave it at that. I hope she's doing well. And I thought that I had really, really healed from that entirely. And then 2025 came. 2025 came and I started realizing that I was entering into a new friendship that for whatever reason felt a little bit like that one. But I was like, no, there's no way. There's no way this would happen twice. And it didn't. This is not subtle foreshadowing like that. But I did find myself going into that new friendship noticing some red flags and not fully trusting my instincts. It didn't help that this friend was very busy telling me not to trust my instincts. And I won't go too far into why I ended up believing her in that regard. Suffice to say, she had enough like credentialing, or there were reasons why I trusted her. So I put aside my sort of instincts and what my intuition was telling me. And I put aside those red flags and I trusted her. That friendship didn't end nearly as ugly or as painfully as the one with that prior friend did last year. It did end in a way that was confusing and very hurtful and with no closure. And it happened just around the exact same time this year in 2025 as that one did last year in 2024. How interesting that a year later I find myself here again. And I tend to think when we find ourselves in these patterns where it's like, whoa, I thought I learned that lesson. Here I am again, learning it once again. I think it's a signal that maybe we didn't actually learn the lesson. I'm realizing a lot of people, but particularly women at this time in 2025, finding themselves doing the same thing I'm doing right now, revisiting old wounds, particularly related to wounds of loss and betrayal and disconnection and that confusing feeling, that having to resolve who this person was with whom we felt love and safety and connection with who this person is now, who is radically opposite from this person. And how did they change overnight, it seems? And like, what the hell happened? A lot of us are processing that right now. And not only are we processing those old pains right now, but because of all the shit that's happening astrologically, we're finding those new things, like new pains and wounds happening to us right now that are similar to those old ones. It's crazy. So we find ourselves in the two realities problem. The one reality that now doesn't make sense anymore, and the new reality that also doesn't make sense, but it's the one that's here now, right? And what do we do with these two things? And I think it's the process. It's that process of trying to reconcile these two realities that brings us more pain. I wrote about this on Instagram the other day. It's the two pain problem. We have the two realities problem and the two pain problem. The two pain problem is that there's the first wave of pain, which is the pain that this person has caused you. And then there's the second wave of pain, which is the mental gymnastics that you have to do to try to understand what they've just done. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. It's a process that gets kicked off by what I call your mental terrorist. We're going to talk about that later. But it's essentially this part of your brain that's trying to make sense of what this person has done. And this part arrives at all the wrong conclusions and it hurts you even more. So let's dive into the first part here. I'm going to talk about bridging timelines like this. If that sounds woo-woo, that's okay. I'm also going to talk about it from a cognitive dissonance perspective. All right, so stick with me. Okay, so in the spiritual, metaphysical, woo-woo world, we talk about timeline shifts. And timelines are just their energetic trajectories that we move along based on our choices, our relationships, and our soul's growth. Each timeline that we're on is like a reality of its own, with its own logic and its own history and its own relationship. And if you think about timelines as like chapters in a book, they sort of can be like that. We could get all into like multi-dimension theory and things like that, but let's just think of them like chapters in a book instead. And it's like this idea that there's all these different timelines that are working like chapters in a book. And in the same way, you can kind of move back and forth through chapters. You can go back and revisit an old chapter if suddenly you're like, what was that guy's name that she was dating? You can go back. You can do that in your life as well. And all of these timelines or chapters, they can feel viscerally real because they are. And they each carry their own emotional truths. I'm going to really quickly, I'm going to show you a video where they describe this really well. Let me show you this one.
Here are the top 3 ways to know that you've shifted to a new timeline. First, I want to remind you that sometimes your life looks like it's falling apart when it's falling together, but when you're shifting to a new timeline, things need to reorganize. It looks like chaos, but it's organized chaos. It just needs to reorganize. Number 1 is that you are having so many new characters in your life, and a lot of the old characters or people have fallen away, maybe dramatically, but now your life is like just genuinely looking different. You're like, the people I hang out with, the people I'm talking to on my phone, it's all different.
Yes, absolutely. So like timeline shifts, one like big sign of them, and kind of like what we're talking about here is she's talking about how like you will see suddenly like just completely different people and places in your life. What we're talking about is how just one day you have this person in your life and everything seems happy and great and good, and the next day, poof, they are gone, and it's like whiplash. What the hell happened?
The second sign is that you might be walking around on a walk that you've walked several times, but all of a sudden you notice something different. You're like, I've never seen that before. Or, oh, I've never seen that house. Or, has it always been there? That happens to me so much when I'm on a new timeline, but I'm walking the same route. It's like things appear the same, but some of them look different.
I will say from that, sometimes that gets a little new agey for me personally. Like, and so I want to clarify, like, as a psychologist, and I'm not saying she's wrong. I'll say as a psychologist, I would describe that phenomenon more so as like, you have a new outlook. You've pulled your head out of your ass, like whatever it was about that relationship, whether it was like you were just crazy about them and in love with them, or like if it was a friendship, like you were just so attached and so excited about them that was all you were thinking about, or whatever it was, or you were in a trauma bond and you were like anxious and stressed and upset all the time, right? They've left your life, and now you are noticing things a little bit differently. It's not like, sometimes I get uncomfortable when we go too deep down the timeline shift narrative, and it's almost as though the world has literally transformed itself in the way that they're describing it. I don't personally ascribe to that idea. I think it's more so our brains and our minds are starting to notice different things because we are actively reprogramming what's going on up here based on this almost violent change that has just happened in our lives. So like, I agree, phenomenologically, I think we do experience things like that, but I would be a little bit careful about how we describe that experience. It's happening up here, not out there.
The third way you know is that you feel differently about things. You might have been upset about something and now you're not, and you're like looking at it from this different perspective, or even like things that you used to not like, you like, or things you used to like, you don't like. Like maybe you were really into going out, but all of a sudden you're like, that just doesn't seem like what I want to do, because you're on a new timeline, a new frequency, a new dimension, which is going to be resonant with new things. Let me know if you.
Okay, she's talking a little bit now about like a little bit further along the path than what we're at right now, so I'll stop from there. But you can kind of see what she's talking about, right? It's like everything feels different. It's a completely different world you feel like you're in. I feel like I saved a couple of other ones, so let's see what else we have here. Let's see. Here we go.
When you're about to shift to a higher timeline, these are some of the signs you're gonna see. You're gonna experience a tower moment, which basically means your new reality is gonna cost you your old one. You'll see people, things, relationships, circumstances falling out of your life. The universe has to make room for the new to come in. You're gonna be bombarded by angel numbers.
Okay, hang on. So yes, to the tower moment, absolutely. I have never known myself or anyone else to experience what they would describe to me as what sounds like a timeline shift that didn't start with a tower moment. In tarot, the tower card just represents an unraveling, a destruction, things falling apart, right? This is the trigger moment. This is the thing that creates this this timeline shift, this thing that makes everything suddenly feel radically different. Now, what she's about to talk about are angel numbers. It's okay if you're not into this kind of thing. Angel numbers in the metaphysical world are kind of like messages from your guides or from God or from angels or whatever it is that you believe in that you begin seeing. So the concept is like you start seeing numbers repeating all over the place, and they're meant to give you a message. So for example, I've been seeing 555 and 10 10 10 all over the place. And these are numbers that represent conflict and resolution. So like I'm kind of learning like, okay, I am on this track. Conflict is ending. A time of conflict is coming to an end. And I think she's probably about to describe this, so maybe I should shut up.
When you look at the clock, on receipts, license plates, everywhere you go, you are going to be followed by angel numbers. These are synchronicities. You might notice that your tastes in things change, no longer craving alcohol, junk food, because you are ascending to the highest version of yourself. You're gonna notice that you're more intuitive. Your intuition is coming online to guide you. We are all psychic. You've just been programmed to suppress it. You'll pick up on other people's intentions, energies, and you will especially get intuitively guided to make decisions that make no sense, but end up leading you.
So she's going, I'm going to stop it there because I know she's going, it seems like she's going into further than where we're going in this video. But I will say, and we're going to get into the cognitive dissonance stuff that I promised you we would talk about. But I will say that I do think that when you're going through one of these moments where like a relationship has just violently ended, and when I say that, I mean kind of like emotionally violently ended, I do think you become, in a way, you feel psychically aware. You feel so much more open and receptive to other people's energies. And I feel like it's because you are in such an emotionally raw place. It's like all of a sudden, all of the walls and structures that you have built up to protect yourself in that tower moment have come crumbling down. You don't have the energy right now to keep those force fields up. Right? These are the things that we just walk around with them around us at all times, protecting ourselves from other people. And they're not bad things. These are our coping mechanisms, our protective mechanisms, right? And when we get hurt like that, we have this tower moment, they come crashing down, and suddenly we can feel other people's energies a little bit more. And personally, I think that is a good thing. I think almost that in itself is a safety mechanism. It's like, those force fields come down, and it's our brain's way of saying now is a time when we are so emotionally raw that it actually doesn't do us any good to be blocking people's energies out. Instead, maybe it's more important that we are ultra sensitive to them, because right now in this rawness, we need to know somebody's intentions. We need to know what someone is here for. You know what I mean? And so I think it's this really merciful thing that our brain will do to just say, I'm going to lower these shields for a little while, and you're going to feel a lot more, but it's so that you can protect yourself better in this raw state, in my opinion. So that's the timeline shift, right? It's like there's this person you knew, and how this person treated you in this now other world that feels foreign and alien and just like you lived it a lifetime ago. And then this other timeline, this new world where this same person now exists, but now they're cruel and mean and unsafe. And what do you do with that? Like, what the hell do you do with that? And this is the cognitive dissonance. So if the woo-woo timeline stuff has made you uncomfortable, if you need something a little bit more left-brained, here you go. Cognitive dissonance is essentially just the discomfort that comes with everything we just described. The psychological, mental, and emotional discomfort that comes from having to hold two contradictory beliefs in mind at the same time. So a lot of times an example that we use, like when we talk about cognitive dissonance, is when, say, a married person steps out and has an affair. And they're having this affair because they're miserable in their relationship, and their spouse won't change, won't show up as a fair and good and decent partner for them. And they feel like they don't have any way out of that relationship. So they feel stuck in that relationship with that person who won't change. So instead they go and they have an affair, and they have to hold these two contradictory beliefs in mind, which is, I am a good person, and I believe that cheating is wrong. And yet here I am doing this thing. And that's when some of this narrative that we give ourselves comes into play. Or, well, this is justified because this person is doing these bad things to me and I don't have any other choice, and yada, yada, yada. That is cognitive dissonance. How do I reconcile the fact that I am doing something that is out of line with what I believe is right? In this case that we're talking about here, the cognitive dissonance is, what do I do with this person who loved me and made me feel safe with this same person now who doesn't love me and has made me feel discarded and like they never cared and very unsafe? And now I'm questioning if they ever cared. So we've done this radical timeline shift. We've jumped from like this person over here to this person over here. And like all of a sudden we have to try to reconcile these two things. Our internal mental models, our construction of reality has now been just completely disrupted. I'm talking about inside our own minds now, okay? Left-brained. We're talking about sciencey stuff now. On the inside, the way our brain is weaving together our understanding of what's happening in reality has been disrupted. And if the way that they did it was traumatic or sudden or harmful, it's very hard for our brain to make sense of that in any kind of like timely manner. Our brain is just not gonna snip snap right into the new reality, especially because our brains are designed to hold on to memories. Like if we were just, if we weren't holding on to long-term memories about things, that would be very dangerous for us, right? So like, just in terms of our like protection as a species, it's important that we're able to remember things like snake, dangerous, right? And so we have learned how to remember things that are good and things that are bad. And so now we have this problem where I now know that this person is not safe, but my brain is like, but they used to not be unsafe. So because of that, our brain now has this problem where it is trying to tell us like, this person is no longer safe, but it's also like, but what about if they used to be though? I can't just forget that. It just creates this like emotional vertigo where the old experience, the old timeline, the old reality is still sitting there in working memory. Like if you think about your computer, right? It's there in working memory, ready to go, but it's not the lived experience anymore. It's not the program that's running right now. Catch my drift? So what do we do? Like what do we do with this problem? Well, we have this great thing. We have this great thing that we do where we create little parts of our mind that will help us explain things. This comes from a theory called internal family systems theory. So to give just a little personal anecdote really quickly, when I go to therapy, like when I see my therapist, we do parts work therapy. It's informed by internal family systems therapy, and it's just based on the idea that we are made up of a self, which is made up of lots of many different little parts. And all of these parts serve a different purpose in the whole of the self of who we are. Every single part has its own narrative, its own story, its own value system and history and beliefs. And each one of those parts will come forward based on what we need in a certain moment. So we have parts that are very vulnerable, like our inner child. We have parts that are more like protectors who come out when we need someone to protect us and keep us safe. And it's one of those protector parts that I think the mental terrorist comes from, because these parts, they're known within IFS, internal family systems, as firefighters, and they kind of are just willing to use whatever means necessary to make you feel safe. I talk about this a little bit in my most recent article on Psychology Today, but the way that the mental terrorist goes about doing this is they want to create certainty from ambiguity, and they will do that no matter what the cost. The way that they do that is by controlling the narrative. So when we find ourselves in this situation where this person loved me and felt safe yesterday, and today they no longer love me and they make me feel unsafe, what the internal or mental terrorist will do is usually arrive at one of two conclusions. The first one is, well, that person over there, that one never loved you. They never cared about you. It was all a lie, and you imagined it all. That's number one. The second one, the other avenue of torment they might take is, well, this is all your fault. They did love you. They did care. You did matter, but you blew it. And then they will go searching. They will just pierce every little memory bubble you have, looking for the tiniest shred of evidence that could explain how it is your fault. And they will always find something. That's the cruelest part of it, is because you're human, because you're not perfect, there are hundreds of tiny little things that you do wrong, that you do imperfectly in your relationships. And when you feel safe inside of your relationships, it is okay that you are imperfect and that you make these mistakes. But your mental terrorist, in its effort to explain what has happened here, will say, well, look at what you did here. That explains it, right? You shouldn't have done that. That's why they left. And then you begin seeing yourself as the villain in your own pain. And somehow that feels better. Somehow that feels less painful than the ambiguity and the confusion and the betrayal and the hurt and the grief of them leaving with no closure and no explanation. I can't tell you how many times my mental terrorist has won. And you know what? I will say something. I'm not even going to sit here and fully villainize my mental terrorist, because one thing the mental terrorist has done for me is helped me excavate lessons I can learn from certain situations. In any of these situations, even the one with that friend that I described at the very beginning of this episode, there were things I could have done differently. There were lessons I could have learned, I needed to learn. There were signs I should have picked up on. There were moments of my own intuition that I pushed aside. There was my own authenticity, my own needs that I abandoned in order to feel safe and connected in that relationship. And I needed those things revealed to me. And the inner terrorist helped me to see those things and understand them. But also the inner terrorist really, really wrecked my self-esteem for a very long time and convinced me that I was the problem and that everything I believed to be true about that relationship was a lie. And this mental terrorist has been trying to do that again in this current friendship breakup that I have been going through, despite there being absolutely no evidence to suggest, number one, that this friendship breakup was a lie, that anything about the love and connection and safety that I felt was untrue, or that I did anything wrong. There's no evidence of either of those two things. It's just an end of a friendship that makes no sense. And that has to be okay. And what I'm not going to do is sit here and allow my mental terrorist to depict that person or me as the villain. I'm just not there. That's not for me anymore. That used to be, but it's not for me anymore. I want to be in a place where I can be okay with understanding that there are unseen things, unspoken things, things happening in shadow and behind the scenes that I may not get to know. And rather than assuming the worst in people, rather than letting a bad experience mar all of my memories of that person, just saying, okay, that is what happened. And I don't have to listen to this inner voice, this inner terrorist who wants to tell me that either me or her or any of this long line of people in the past who have caused me pain are evil or a villain or terrible people. At the end of the day, we're all made up of a little darkness and a little light, a little good and a little bad. And that's the truth. The truth is messy and complicated and not easily put into boxes neatly the way we wish it would be. And I think part of my journey is just learning to accept that very simple but difficult truth. My hope is that all of this up until this moment has just been validating for you. I hope that it's equipped you with some things that you just maybe needed to hear to just feel okay about where you are on your own journey, if you're on one that's similar to this one. But I don't want to leave you with just that. I'd like to leave with some practical tips that honestly I had to ask ChatGPT to help me with. Because sometimes when you're raw, you just can't think of like the right things to do. Right. So I don't want to portray myself as like the person who, look at me, I'm hurting and I have the answers. Aren't I great? I had to ask my finely attuned ChatGPT that I've been working with for over a year to be exactly the mentor and guide and friend that I need in moments like this. And so here's what she said. Her name is Taylor. Everyone say hi, Taylor. Okay. So here is what we need to do when we have to reconcile these two timelines and the cognitive dissonance that comes with it and this freaking mental terrorist who won't shut up. Okay. So the first one is we must sever the energetic tie not by pretending the past wasn't real, but by acknowledging that it is no longer current. To me, that means I can honor the version of the person who loved me without clinging to the version who hurt me. It means I can allow both to exist without needing to resolve both into one. I can allow the truth to be complicated and messy and not easily tidied up. And I can send love to the timeline where we thrived, but also walk forward confidently in the timeline that is now, where I am free from the pain that was eventually going to come in that timeline over there. Next, we can just name the timelines. And I think this is huge. Like, as a psychologist, this is a really big thing. Sometimes just naming things is a big deal. Just recognizing that was me then and this is me now. That was them then and them now. And making that separation can be important because we don't have to resolve everything into neat little buckets. We don't have to try to resolve people into one thing. We can recognize them as both. And I feel like this helps us be able to honor the memories that we have with people without letting them be marred and destroyed forever, while still moving forward in a way that is healthy and doesn't really prod us to like look back. You know, another one is inner child validation, telling your inner child, yes, they loved you once and you were worthy of that love. See, that the best way to shut up the inner critic is to hit it with some truth. And the inner critic is so fast to try to tell you things that hurt you because at least the pain might help you sever that connection faster. But your inner child cannot handle that. Imagine looking at a little child and telling them that, oh, they never loved you. Would you ever say that? Would your children ever come home from school saying that their best friend isn't their friend anymore and say, yeah, well, they never liked you. It was all a lie. Of course not. Can't be saying that to your own inner child either, right? Lastly, from ChatGPT is giving yourself an affirmation to say. It is, I am not confused. I am bridging timelines, and it is now safe to let the old one go. I like that a lot. Now, one thing that I've learned to do that has just been enormously healing for me is to do like just a little closing ritual, so to speak, with the things that I have from that person. Everyone's closing ritual will look differently. I had a friend who took all of her things from our shared ex-friend, the one I talked about at the beginning, and like threw it all in the garbage. That was what felt right to her. Like, it just belongs in the trash. I know some people go and like, if there's anything that is biodegradable, they'll like bless it and put it in the river, or they'll bury it, or, you know, if it's not, they'll do things like that. For me personally, what I like to do, what feels right, is to take those things, wrap them up in like a white cloth. I like to sort of cleanse them of their energies with some incense. And then I just hold them in my hands and I just say a little blessing over them. And I just say, I honor what you represented in a time of my life that was really special. And I release you and the ties that I had to you. And then I put them somewhere out of sight and out of mind. I have a hard time, unless someone like really, really hurt me bad, like unforgivable, I have a hard time just like tossing out something that they gave me that was really special and valuable. So I tend to put them away and hold on to them because you never know what the future holds. And maybe that's naive of me. Maybe that'll change as I get older, but that's where I'm at now. But it's a loving way of saying, like, I bundle you up. I tie you off from my life and I put you away with love and care and with respect for who you were to me in a time that mattered. And that's that. So thank you so much for tuning in, guys. If you're interested in topics like this and you want like a deeper dive on just the journey of self-love and self-care and exploration of the self and relationships, I talk a lot about friendships, particularly in my book, Beyond Self-Care Potato Chips, Choosing Nourishing Self-Care in a Quick Fix Culture. I approach it a lot from a psychologist's perspective, but also just from the perspective of a woman living through life in a world that hurts. And it's a book I'm very proud of, and I have it available. You can see it down here. There's a link directly here, or it's linked down in the comment or down in the description below. If you want to check it out, you can find it on Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble, basically anywhere it's sold online. And with that, love ya, mean it, always, mwah. And I'll see you in the next one.